contribute to optimal health and academic outcomes for all children and youth. We have a very well-received and respected Journal of School Health, and today you're lucky enough to have the current editor, Dr. Robert McDermott, speaking to you as the primary faculty on this webinar. As I've noted before, and will note again, we have an annual conference in San Antonio that's this October. To get a proposal accepted, it must be received here by April the 2nd. There will be no extensions. We also recommend folks visit our webpage frequently, become a friend on Facebook. That way you get information pretty much in real time. There are a number of reasons you should join the American School Health Association. You get 12 copies of the Journal of School Health each year. In addition, you have access to school health listservs in a variety of topic and professional areas. Access to the Pulse blog, which updates all of the activities for the various sections, councils, and training provided by ASHA. You can join one section, have membership in 2 separate councils, receive discounts on ASHA publications, and you get free continuing education contact hours, particularly at the conference. You're also eligible to serve in our leadership and join us. And next month, we're rolling out a whole variety of new individual health insurance opportunities that will allow members of ASHA to make application for their own personal use. Now my pleasure to turn to the introduction of our speaker today. Our primary presenter and faculty member is Dr. Robert J. McDermott. He received his undergraduate degree and his doctorate degrees through the University of Wisconsin in Madison. From 81 to 86, he was a faculty member in the Department of Health Education at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. His research on smokeless tobacco use among youth was cited in the Surgeon General's '86 report on the health effects of smokeless tobacco, and he's contributed to the establishment of health warning labels on these products. Dr. McDermott came to the University of South Florida College of Public Health in '86, and he served as chair of the Department of Community and Family Health between '93 and '03. In '98, he headed an effort that successfully led to being awarded a Prevention Research Center by the U.S. Center for Disease Control. He's continued to serve as the co-director of the center. The Florida Prevention Research Center at the University of South Florida has attracted approximately $15.4 million in extramural funding. They've published approximately 40 referenced articles and book chapters, and they've created a new model for health behavior change in communities, community-based prevention marketing during the 14-year existence. It's my pleasure today to open up the session to Dr. McDermott. When we get to a question and answer period, we'll ask you to type your questions. We'll be joined by Dr. Joseph Dake at the University of Toledo. So at this moment, Dr. McDermott, we're going to pass to you. Here we go.
My screen hasn't popped up yet, but I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you for participating today. I hope the session will be instructional and as well as enjoyable, and that will result in people writing abstracts that will end up on the program at the American School Health Association meeting this year. So again, welcome, and we will get underway. And not sure exactly how long my presentation will take. I'm guessing maybe about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, but we'll certainly have some time left over for questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. I've tried to cram as much into this PowerPoint presentation as possible, but if it generates some questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Dr. Conley has given you some idea of what the overall objectives are for the day, but you know, I'm going to give you a short preview of what I hope to accomplish today, and basically how to write a good conference abstract. And it starts out by responding to the call for abstracts. I'd like to talk a little bit about the purpose of a conference abstract, what it's supposed to do, what it should do for people who are trying to judge it. If there are people online today here that are fairly new, then do what I can to demystify the review process. And I also want to try to help you get inside the reviewer's head. Now, no doubt some of you have reviewed abstracts before for conferences, perhaps even some extensively. I would not even begin to hazard a guess at how many abstracts I've reviewed over the last 30 years, but it has to number in the thousands. So I've got a pretty good idea, at least, of what's inside my head, and we'll try to project that to other reviewers as well. Having reviewed a lot of abstracts, though, got a pretty good idea of what constitutes a poor one, and that won't be our focus today, but rather what constitutes a good one. So this is where we're headed, and although most of the talk today is going to be quite specific to the American School Health Association, I think that there are some generic things that we can say about abstract writing and abstract review that's going to apply to just about any conference. So if I'm considering writing an abstract for a conference, the first question I'm going to ask myself is, what's the conference theme, and how does that intersect with my life and my work? Where is it? I mean, where is the conference being held? And maybe that's a reflection of having been at this for 30 or more years, but location, location, location is can be very important. And I have to say that the Riverwalk in San Antonio is one of my favorite spots. So you can bet that you'll see me at the ASHA conference in October. When is it? What's the deadline for submissions? After I submit my abstract, when will I be notified of a decision? And then specifically, what kinds of presentations are being sought? And at some conferences, this can be quite a diverse set of presentations. As you see here on the slides, we're going to be talking today mostly about oral presentations and poster presentations. The call for papers or call for abstracts also has, usually contains abstract details. How many words, that is, how long is the abstract? Should it be structured? In other words, have headings, or unstructured? And then, specifically, are you asked to identify format for your presentation, and then some details about how to submit it. So all of this is, pretty much applies to any conference. But let's take a look at specifically how this applies to the ASHA conference for this coming year. If you're a member of ASHA, no doubt you get an email that announces the conference and a call for papers. And if somehow you miss that, you can go to the ASHA website, www.ashaweb.org, and move around a little bit until you find the call for abstracts. And the URL that you're looking at is where you can find it for this year. The theme of the 86th annual meeting is Making Connections, the People, Passion, and Promise of School Health. That is a very broad set of topics. So the first thing that would pop into my mind is, who are the people? What kind of passion do they bring? And what is the promise of school health? That's pretty much should fit just about anybody's agenda if you're involved in school health. And as Dr. Conley already identified, where we're going and when it is, and actually when the proposal deadline is, we've already got that information. The decision is you'll be notified by May 18th, and a couple of specifics about the abstract. The title needs to be limited to 100 characters, and the abstract a maximum of 250 words. And we're going to be looking at some abstract examples in a little while, and I'll point some things out to you that reflect either very good adaptations of an abstract or not so good. What I'd like to emphasize about the 250 words is that these need to be well-chosen words. Sometimes writing something that's brief is much more difficult than writing something that's lengthier. As Abraham Lincoln is attributed to having said when writing a letter to a friend one day, he said, "I apologize for writing such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a shorter one." So one of the lessons or takeaway lessons today is that when the abstract writing is a bit of a science and a bit of an art, but it's not something that works very well if you wait till the last minute to do it. And I'll come back to that point in a little while. Now this is a very busy slide, and I apologize for that, but it is lifted directly off of the ASHA call for papers, and it identifies how ASHA research abstracts are going to should be structured for the 2012 meeting. And the first thing you should know here is this is a big hint as to how they are going to be judged. So you see that the abstract is a structured abstract, and it's structured around these 5 specific headings, which, if you're a reviewer, makes your review process a little bit easier. If you're writing the abstract, it should make it a little bit easier as well, maybe a lot easier. But I will tell you that year after year after year after year, abstracts are submitted that are not structured, even though these structured headings are not just advised, but it's clear that this is how they're going to be judged. Now that doesn't mean that the abstract is uninterpretable. It simply means that you put a lot more burden on the reviewer to find the significance for school health, to find the purpose of the study, to find what the key results are, and then to make some conclusion about what it all means. If you put it down and structure it this way, I'm going to tell you about something I call the 80% rule a little bit later on. In fact, I'll tell you about it now. My 80% rule is, I suspect some of you have heard that the quote attributed to Woody Allen that 90% of life is just showing up. Well, I think 80% of getting your abstract accepted at a meeting is just following the directions. So the 80% rule is if you do this, you've automatically increased your chances of being accepted on a program. But that brings us to what's the point of an abstract. An abstract reports on the research that you've done. It should accurately summarize your work so that people, and in the specific case here, the abstract reviewers, can try to visualize what you did in their minds and to relate it to other work that they're familiar with. Now it has to be compelling. That's why I emphasize 250 well-chosen words, because it has to convince the reviewers that comprise the program committee to accept it. And once on the program, it needs to be compelling enough to have people want to attend your session, whether it's a poster or an oral presentation. To do this, what it has to accomplish is it has to convey scientific merit as well as importance. You want to tell people this is something that if you're coming to this conference, skip everything else but come to my session. Mention that I want to demystify the review process for people who either haven't done this before or haven't done it very often. Typically, a program chair is going to try to find 2 to 5 reviewers. And in the particular case of ASHA, and you have to remember ASHA represents a lot of different interests. It represents school nurses, school food services, guidance counselors, parents, teachers, academicians, researchers, non-researchers, practitioners, advocates, and people who just care. So the membership really represents a broad area, and that means that the conference theme, as you see, is a very broad one. So the reviewers may very well represent some of that breadth, not all coming from a research area, and certainly not always coming from the research area about which you're submitting. Okay, reviewers are going to rate abstracts using criteria that are provided by the program organizers, often resulting in a numerical score. And guess what, folks? Those scores are going to be based on significance to school health, purpose, procedures, those structured headings that you saw in the call. Reviewers may also be asked to provide some confidential comments for the program committee, and then might say things like, well, it's an interesting piece of work, but it's really redundant. It's about information that's been well established. It doesn't provide any new things, new insights, new ways of looking at the problem, etc. Or it's duplicative. That is, I've seen this work before. I've seen the presentation before at other conferences, and the audience at this conference is going to be very similar to where it's been before. So, originality is an important aspect here. The other thing that reviewers are asked to do is provide feedback for authors, especially if the proposal is accepted. And this is to help the presenter not only, your presentation's been accepted, and that's great, but it's now, here's some things that you can do to make it even more relevant, more useful for the people who are likely to be in attendance. So, this is all part of the review process and part of the reviewer's tasks. All right, what does the program committee or the conference abstract chair do? Well, if he or she is doing his job properly, he's going to read all of the submissions, or at least maybe divvy them up among a small group of people, each of whom will read the set of abstracts that is presented to them. The committee is going to look at all of the reviews and the marks that have been assigned, and the program chair has some latitude in interpreting reviewer scores. Not all reviewers are created equal. Not all reviews are equally useful. So there is some latitude that the program chair and the program committee has in making some final decisions. But this is a group that is going to decide which papers are rejected based on either the criteria for submission having been met or the merit of the study itself. Now, the easiest way to get kicked out is by not meeting the criteria, such as perhaps not having something that has much to do with school health, doesn't have anything to do with the conference theme, or isn't organized around those headings that I've made reference to. They're also going to make decisions about what becomes a poster, what becomes an oral presentation, or other formats. And this isn't always around, as some people believe, that the highest rated papers are necessarily delivered orally or recommended to be delivered as talks, and lesser ones as posters. But really, it's about what's the best format. If it's something that's very visual, perhaps the best way to present it is via a poster rather than through an oral presentation. If it's something that involves a lot of detail and explanation, well, then maybe it is better suited for an oral presentation. So it's not always a matter of quality. Not everybody who gets accepted on the program necessarily is able to attend the program, and if you get accepted and for some reason can't attend, you need to let the program organizers know as soon as possible, because you don't want to get on a blacklist. And the thing that is a problem is if you've gotten accepted and then you just don't show to give the presentation, and that is that's an awkward person or awkward situation for the person who's organizing the session. But obviously, it may prohibit other people who could have attended and presented from doing so. So the organizers will also identify some alternate or backup papers if for some reason someone ultimately can't attend and there's some time for someone to get on the program who originally was not accepted. The aim in all of this is to have the highest quality program possible, something that is appealing to a broad audience that represents all of the as many of the constituent groups that comprise ASHA as possible, and something that is exciting and that people are going to definitely want to attend. How many slots are available is often dependent on the specific conference and the acceptance rate, therefore, is based not only on the number of submissions, but on the available space. This was not an ASHA conference, but I'd like to share with you some data from a conference that I was involved in pretty recently that where I served as the abstract chair. And to give you some ideas of the numbers, because I think these numbers are not terribly off from what ASHA will receive in a typical year. There were 168 total submissions, but 148 of them, 20 of them were kicked out. And they were kicked out because they didn't follow the directions or they were not relevant to the conference theme. So again, my 80% rule, it's your chances are greatly improved if you follow the instructions. Had about 60 reviewers, so that meant that about tried to limit abstracts, only 5 to 10 to each person. That enabled all of them to be reviewed and be reviewed by multiple persons representing some diverse interests. More than 1,000 reviews were turned in, and in terms of how they were divvied up for the program, 16% of them became oral presentations, 40% were posters. Posters will often be the largest, represent the largest proportion of acceptances, and then there were a few that were accepted for roundtable discussions. 65% acceptance rate overall, so if you wrote a good abstract, followed the directions, submitted it on time, submitting on time is important, folks, then you really have a high probability of getting yourself on the program. I'm going to try to get inside the reviewer's head a little bit. What does this all look like from the, mainly been talking about the perspective of the program chair, the abstract chair, the program committee. A little bit about what does this look like from the reviewer's perspective. And I think this is very relevant to the ASHA conference because some of our reviewers are going to be assigned abstracts that are outside their specific field of expertise. Again, given the breadth of the American School Health Association, the composition of the organization, people are going to represent slightly different disciplines. You know, my expertise might be in measuring health behavior among youth, yet I might receive abstracts that are about school food services, school nursing services, not things that I'm totally ignorant about, but things that I haven't made a life study of. So what that means for the author is that you have to provide me with information that is compelling, that I can see the relevance of, and that is not laden with a bunch of jargon or abbreviations that I might not be familiar with, because that's going to be confusing to me and it's going to probably jade my judgment a little bit about the relevance for a very broad audience. The reviewer is going to be asked to make a decision about whether the submitter has made clear in the abstract the things that are asked for, the scientific soundness of the abstract, the originality of the research, whether it's important and has widespread importance, again, for the breadth of the audience, and then something about the suitability as a talk versus a poster. So again, and these are kinds of questions that a reviewer is going to ask himself or herself, given that you have about 10 abstracts to review. Sometimes there's more, but if you're trying to accomplish this in, while you're waiting to have your car fixed, or while you're waiting in an airport, or you're on a flight somewhere, or just the end of the day, the beginning of the day, or an idle time when abstract review sort of fits in your schedule, if you're trying to do it efficiently, all the more reason for these things, these headings to be clear and the presentation to be as faithful to the call for papers as possible. So is the work relevant? Why is it interesting? Is it original? Does it employ theory? Will it be interesting to a wide audience? And again, ASHA represents a wide audience. Is it clear what's been done? Is it replicable? Are the methods sound? Is it clear? Is it something that has only local interest, or if it's a case study, might it be something that can be employed or deployed elsewhere? One of the most important things is, has the work actually been done? Or as I sometimes say, is someone just delivering a promissory note that it's okay, it's only April 2nd, but by October 10th, I promise I will have results for you. Well, in that event, you can take your chances, but it's going to be much more interesting if maybe you wait till next year and tell us what you actually found. And it's not always about whether the results are statistically significant. It may be just as important to, are they practically significant? What relevant aspect or application to practice do these results have? And I know a lot of people who prefer to do qualitative research have on their mind, if I don't have statistical results, or I don't have a chi-square value or a p-value or a something of that nature, does that invalidate what I've done if I'm reporting qualitative research? And the answer is no. I think ASHA is as glad to get qualitative research abstracts as any other kind. They need to be presented in ways that are decipherable, though. All right, let's explore briefly how to write a bad abstract, and then move on how to write a good one. Certainly if the work is only marginally relevant to school health and doesn't reflect anything about the conference theme, it's not clear why the work is important. Doesn't seem to be based on any theory. It's not related to some chain of inquiry, and maybe it seems to be only interesting to two people in the world, one person who presented it, maybe one other person out there. Methods are very important, and there's not a lot of space in 250 words to get into the details of the methods. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But clearly, if the work hasn't been carried out, if the practical significance can't be declared some way in the conclusions or recommendations for practice, then it's going to be hard to convince people that this is important work, particularly if the conclusions don't appear to follow from the data. And one of the abstracts that we're going to look at, that will be clear. Back to getting inside the reviewers' minds. Again, you have to make it absolutely clear that the work is relevant and important. Sometimes good work can be reported in a bad abstract, and that's unfortunate. I'm sure that I have read hundreds of abstracts that probably were based on good work, but people did not take the time to write a good abstract, and so the importance and quality of the work were not conveyed in that process, and that's unfortunate. Things that should have been on a program maybe didn't get to the program, and I think that's why I recommend that you really take maybe up to a week before this abstract is due to prepare it and let some other people take a look at it. What you don't want to have happen is have the reviewer have to pick out what's the significance, what did they do, what are the key results, and what meaning does it have for school health practice. That's the stuff that you have to provide, and the people who write successful people who write successful abstracts are very good at presenting that. Okay, let's get to the important meaty part of this webinar. How do you write a good abstract? And I think you start out by situating your work. How does it fit the grand scheme of school health? And if you belong to ASHA and you do work with schools and children and youth and people who work at schools, you have some idea of what the grand scheme of school health is all about. So where does your work fit into that? How is it interesting? In what way is it unique or original? And what significance does it have for school health? Your abstract ought to give some relevant background. You don't have space to talk about all of these things, but you do need to take make an effort to talk about some of them. How does your work fill a gap? How does it advance theory? You know, and if you used a particular instrument and found it to be useful, to have utility in studying the population that you looked at, maybe it's a good idea to name that instrument. And you have to remember again that the reviewer may not be doing the same kind of work that you do, so it might be from outside of your immediate area. Giving results is important, and giving numbers where it's feasible to do so can help that reviewer form a picture of your research in his or her mind. How many people did you look at? You know, the number proportion in each condition that you found. What statistical values? And it might be quite satisfactory to just say our results were statistically significant at the 0.05 level. It doesn't. You don't always have to delve into the specifics and the painful details of the statistical analysis. If you say you did a statistical analysis and you name it and you name the level of significance, reviewers are inclined to believe you. You know, that may be as far as you have to take it. What is important is, having presented those results, then what implications do they have? What should schools or school personnel be doing that is actionable or changes what we presently do? So basically, you have to answer some important questions that might be on the reviewer's mind, and I've tried to indicate what some of those are. And proactively show the reviewer that your work meets the criteria, not have the reviewer have to dig for it or mine for it. It should be almost a hand coming out of the abstract slapping the face of the reviewer saying, look, this is what we did and it's good stuff. I want to come back and talk a little bit about whether one puts in for an oral presentation or a poster, or it doesn't matter. But you're going to be asked to specify a format. Normally, anything that's submitted for a talk might also be considered for a poster, but the opposite is not necessarily true. And I want to at least give my impression of what I think are some misconceptions about presentations at conferences. Talks are commonly considered as being more prestigious and more competitive. Well, they might be more competitive because of space limitations, but I think space is the issue more than a matter of prestige. Do talks get the widest audience? I have to tell you folks, in 30 years I've given talks to auditoriums with standing room only, and talks to people where I thought I was just talking to friends and relatives, or maybe the other presenters. So it doesn't necessarily get you the widest possible audience. In fact, maybe a poster does, because you've got people who specifically targeted your work and who want to come and see it. And then there are people who are out just browsing, window shopping the poster session, and they run across your work and they didn't read about it in the program, but now they're attracted to it because of the title or maybe the attractiveness of the poster itself. Does an oral presentation raise your profile more? Maybe, but only if you've got, maybe if you got new shoes or something. But I don't think it does raise your profile any more than a poster session does. Talks rarely give you an opportunity for in-depth discussion. Talks are going to be 15 or 20 minutes in length, and then we're going to move on to the next presenter, and then we're going to move on to the next session. And it's going to be a cattle call from one place to the next. So there may not be opportunity to meet up with the speaker. And so, again, I'm not sure that this is the best place or the best venue for in-depth discussion. The other thing is, if you don't like to give talks, you find standing in front of a group to be intimidating, then it's really a matter of preference and comfort. For whatever reason, and I was taught this, and thousands of others have been taught this too, posters are commonly seen as being less prestigious. I don't agree with that. It's a line on your CV, and 10 years from now, neither you nor anybody who attended will remember whether it was a poster, an oral presentation, or some kind of juggling act. Posters don't reach necessarily a smaller audience. In fact, quite the opposite, for reasons I mentioned earlier. You may also reach a more targeted audience because someone self-selected to come to your poster, whereas they may have wandered into an oral presentation and have to sit through 4 talks that they're not interested in to get to yours. It certainly does give you a chance to discuss your work in more depth at greater length, and in fact, even to find research partners for the future. And I have 25 experiences like that at least of people who were doing similar work. Either I came up to them or they came up to me, and we started talking, and lo and behold, we've got a project of our own subsequent to that. So I think it really, the posters give you the best opportunity to do that. And so the feedback may not only be more detailed, but it might be more useful. All right, I'm going to take a little pause here, and I would like you to, we're going to look at 3 abstracts. I'm going to take them one at a time. Not take a lot of time because I don't want to use up all of our time in doing this. But here's an abstract that I would say is a good abstract. This is a fictionalized abstract that one is, as they say on TV, based on a true story. And so just take a quick look at it, and then I'm going to give you an account, my account at least, of how I think it should be sized up. But it's, I would say, of the 3 that we're going to look at, it's the best one. This is where speed reading practice really comes into play. I'm going to give you about 15 more seconds, and then we're going to talk about it. And hopefully, these slides can be made available to you. And if assume the good folks at ASHA can do that, and if not, if you send me an email, then I will make them available to you. The first thing I want to say is the title. Remember, the title needs to be 100 characters or less. This one is actually, I think I counted 69 characters. So it's actually a long title. So 100 characters is plenty of space to give you something that is descriptive, and I think this is. I think we've established the significance for school health. The problem's been noted, the sources of the problem, the potential of schools to contribute to some solution. The research purpose and the measures have been defined. To the extent that space allows, what was done is described. And because we're dealing with a young sample here, 3rd to 5th graders, we're not relying on written instruments, but mainly observation and talking to them. We have reported some numbers in our results. We've reported statistical significance. We've noted some change. Sometimes it was attitude change, but not behavior change. But the results are consistent with what was intended to be studied. And our conclusion is consistent with the data. Specifically, it doesn't report unrelated things that we didn't measure, and we haven't overstated the conclusions based on what we found. So having said that, and I'm sorry if you're still looking at it, but we're now moved on to abstract number 2, which in effect is the same study, but written up somewhat differently. And please, I think especially if you take a quick read of this, you'll find some of the disadvantages of not having structured it the way that the guidelines for submission instruct you to. And you probably will find some other things that detract from its scientific rigor. And again, I'm going to jump in here and say, The title is not particularly descriptive. It doesn't tell us, sort of what to expect. It's not structured. So some of the points that we're looking for, or the reviewer should be looking for, are there, but they're harder to pick out. The tone is more judgmental. It's very impassioned, but it is less scientifically unbiased, let's say, than the other one was. And the conclusions that are reported may go beyond the data, and in fact discuss some things that don't have anything to do with the data. Which brings us to abstract number 3. And you'll see, again, to take a quick look at that. The title of this is somewhat intriguing. It reports on a different project, one that is also based on a true story. The abstract definitely follows the guidance. It has all of those nice headings that we've been emphasizing. But the bottom line here is it's an interesting study, but it's not particularly one that's relevant to school health. And there's only a gratuitous mention in the about line 4, I think, that there's a gratuitous reference to youth, but it's really, this is not something that's probably appropriate for the American School Health Association meeting. It's a great study, but it's a great study for presentation at some other meeting. So this is, these are the kinds of things that are going to, reviewers are going to look at and make decisions about. So you want to make sure that you've got those headings, but that you've clearly established the relevance to school health. And we're sort of on the downside now of this webinar where we can get to some questions. But I want to emphasize some things and provide some final hints. Meeting the word limit is often a major challenge for people. Some ways that you can minimize that is number your examples, look for obvious redundancies, use common abbreviations freely, but if it's something, again, remember that not everybody is familiar with your whereas most people might know what the YRBS is, not everybody in the universe does. So you might have to spell that out at least the first time. As I said before, don't offer more statistical detail than what might be necessary. If you learn to write in the active voice, it takes up much less space than the passive voice. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, get a good copy of the book Elements of Style by Strunk and White, and you'll understand it perfectly, or retake 8th grade English. Most importantly, have other people read it, and this is why it's important to give yourself a few days. Can people, can someone who doesn't know anything about the kind of work you do decipher it? I think that this is the most, I still do this. I'm pretty good at writing abstracts, but I still let people read them and offer feedback, and even people who are relatively new to this process often offer me feedback that is terribly useful. As some of the people who are actually sitting in this room around me today, listening in on the webinar, can attest. Follow the directions, meet the deadlines. Don't send something in on April 3rd. Make sure it fits in the box, contains the right number of words, and it, like I said, not following the directions gets you kicked out. Remember the 80% rule. Your chances of getting accepted are improved enormously simply by following the direction. It's an artistic process, though, to some extent, and I'm not trying to say you have to be the Renoir of abstracts, but they do take a little bit more effort and time than some people often are inclined to offer them. Don't try to write the abstract at 4 o'clock if it's due at 5 o'clock. Give yourself a few days. Let other people look at it. Give yourself perhaps as much as a week. Conference presentations are a key part of an academic career. And it's a skill that you need to learn how to do and do well and become practiced at. So that to some extent it becomes secondary in nature, but certainly that you're not putting it together as an afterthought. Think about the different formats to disseminate your ideas, the advantages and disadvantages of each. And if you really want to get on a program or increase your chances of getting on a program, always choose the format, no format presence or preference, because that means you'll be considered for just about every format that is being offered for that conference. ASHA and many other organizations ask you to include learner objectives. You need to write at least one. ASHA says a maximum of 4. Try writing at least 2. Use action words. And here are some action words that are easily applicable to all kinds of research. And then it also asks you to write a 60-word summary for inclusion in the program. And that's not really the abstract that is going to be reviewed, but it's the thing that people who will look at the program at the conference, and they'll make a decision maybe on whether they come to your session based on that 60-word abstract or 60-word summary. So that is the end of my formal presentation. We have some time, and I am going to turn it over to the audience and to the hosts of this webinar now to proceed.
Dr. McDermott, thank you very much for this presentation. We have received some questions, but this is the time that we would open up our audience and ask if you have specific questions to Dr. McDermott. I'm going to be adding one more member of the faculty in just a moment, but I'd like to make a couple announcements while we hold for additional questions. I think Dr. McDermott, I'm going to ask you to hold down your microphone a little. I think we're picking up some echo. Okay. The next of the Research Council webinars sponsored by the American School Health Association is April 17th. And I hope you'll pay attention and look for that on our webpage. It'll be, April 26th. It'll be dealing with utilizing secondary data sources. Dr. McDermott addressed a few of the public data sets that are available. I know that my own work has dealt with the National Longitudinal Survey of Adolescent Health, which is continuing to grow. There are other such great databases in addition to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey Surveillance System. There's a National Survey of Family Growth, and a lot of different places where your interest can be queried, and you may find things that are really helpful to the field. The date that I mentioned by mistake, April 17th, is the second of a bullying prevention set of 2 workshops that we're hosting. That one will be dealing with evaluation of bullying prevention programs. So remember and note, if you will, on your calendar for the Research Council, it's April 26th on the use of secondary data sources. If I could go to one other point before we move to the first question, we are providing certified health education specialist credits for today. If you're attending the workshop, you'll receive an email with a SurveyMonkey link. Once you've completed the evaluation survey, it'll direct you to another place to pick up your certificate. And we hope you'll do so. We hope you'll tell your friends. We hope a number of folks will take advantage. We are a provider of CHES credits. I'd like to also now bring you to introduction to a gentleman who is the chair of the Research Council for the American School Health Association. Dr. Joseph Dake is also the chair of the Department of Health and Recreation Professions at the University of Toledo. And we're really happy to have him here to also assist with answering questions. If I would begin with you 2 gentlemen, and I'll make it a toss-up as to who wants to go first and make a response. The first question that I've seen that I think is interesting for our population, individuals working in a college setting and has been looking at feedbacks and evaluation data coming from those students who attend the on-campus student health clinic. Is this something that would be of interest to the reviewers at American School Health?
Do you want to respond, Robert, or would you like me?
I'll take the first stab at it, and you can follow up. Principally, ASHA is interested in audiences that are pre-K to grade 12. So that something that's focused on a college audience doesn't fit the primary niche for either the conference or the Journal of School Health. So if you were to organize something around this, somehow you'd have to relate it convincingly to a school-age population, high school or whatever.
I would just add that I would recommend that they seek the American College Health Association conference if it's really strongly related to college health students.
Okay, we have another question related to two conferences coming up very close to each other. And the individual is asking, I have a mental health research evaluation presentation, but there is another conference in Salt Lake City directly after the ASHA conference in Texas. I'm considering submitting my abstract to both. Is this against the rules, or will it hurt my chances with ASHA?
Dr. Dake, why don't you handle that one first, and then I'll comment.
And this is, I think this is going to be a matter of debate among different individuals. My personal opinion on that is not submitting them to two national conferences, but it's sort of depending on the audience that you're targeting. So if there's a state conference targeting local individuals and you're presenting information, and then you want to submit that to a national ASHA conference and you're going to modify it to broaden the audience, I don't see a problem with that. But sort of copying and pasting the exact presentation from one national conference to another, I generally try to avoid myself. Robert, I don't know if
I think that's pretty good advice. No, I think that's pretty good advice. Mental health is not an area that I think we see a lot of submissions to ASHA about, though. And I think it's an important area. So, I mean, I agree with Dr. Dake that it may depend on the audience. I'd be excited about going to Salt Lake City, too, since it also is one of my favorite places. So I don't know. It would be very tempting.
Okay, we have another question. Individual saying, I've noticed that the topic areas include not just research, but teaching techniques and then a more general category. My area of presentation interest is not research. We have a very interesting program that we think is being effective in changing adolescent behaviors. We are collecting data, but that will not be complete by October. Is this still something that we could consider because of our excitement about the model?
I'll go ahead and jump on that one, Robert.
Well, okay, as you may be familiar with, ASHA has many different avenues for presentation. What we've been talking about mainly this afternoon are presentations for the Research Council, but teaching technique presentations are also an important part of that meeting. It's got the proposal presentation process is a little bit different from what we have been talking about, but even in the absence of data, as a teaching technique that may have relevance and actually may find other people who want to apply it and could even engage your data collection process or enhance it a little bit more by looking at other venues, I would encourage it being submitted.
But not to the Research Council, to one of the other sessions. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That is correct.
And let me just add to that I think I would agree with Robert completely, and I would add that after a year of collecting data to determine the effectiveness, that would then become a possibility for the subsequent conference for research on looking at the evaluation or the effectiveness of that program.
Okay, and again, I'll tell folks who are still with us that they can still submit questions. I think the last one I have here for you two gentlemen is, I have been studying student absentee rates at a local high school. Does this sound like a topic of interest to ASHA?
You want to lead it, Bob?
Dr. Dake, your turn to go first.
Okay.
No.
As Dr. McDermott described in his presentation, it's really linking whatever that research is to the health of that school-age population. I think there's a lot of opportunity to link a whole variety of school factors to health issues, but if it's solely focused on absenteeism or school-related issues without building that bridge to health, I would say it's not going to be a likely accepted abstract unless you can bring that health component in.
True, but there are some ways to do it, certainly, if you have access to information. School attendance certainly is linked very much to school achievement, and school achievement, or perhaps the lack thereof, has been linked to lower health literacy, populations at higher risk for various negative health behaviors. So to the extent that those things tie in, I think it's incumbent on the person in writing the abstract to make sure that they tie in. As I tried to point out in writing a compelling abstract, then I think it has value, certainly.
Right. So we're on the same.
We're on the same screen. Well, I want to thank both of you gentlemen for your time today, and Dr. McDermott, you in particular, for your presentation. I think this is a great start for us. I'll remind people, as you did, thank you, that April 2nd is the drop-dead deadline for abstract submissions for the San Antonio conference. And the conference we held in Louisville brought a great number of people with a great lot of interest, and we felt that we built a lot of community in Louisville. We hope you'll join that community in Texas with us. Both of these gentlemen attend most all of the ASHA conferences, and will be available there for a more informal, in-person type of discussion. And with that said, again, thanks to everyone. I hope that you will come to the ASHA webpage often, tell your friends, visit us, become a member. It would be wonderful to have you as part of this community. Thanks again, Dr. Dake, and thanks, Dr. McDermott, as well.
Goodbye, all.
Thanks a lot.
Here.